Hi, this is Jim of Shiloh Kahal, and I would like to do a video I'm entitling The Hope of Yisra'el. About 1,500 years prior to Messiah, Moses had led the families, the descendants of Abraham, out of Egypt and into the promised land where they were to become a nation. And as they came out of Egypt, one of the first things they did was stop at Mount Sinai, where Moses went up into the mountain and was given the tablets of commands and the laws and to share with the nation, the group of people who were to become that nation of Israel. And when he comes down and they all meet together, he shares the law first, the commands, the Torah, and then he shares, here's, if you were to hearken to Yahuah, your Elohim, and keep these commands, here are the blessings that will follow you. And then they're also shared if you do not. It's shared with them what would happen if they do not hearken to the voice of Yahuah, their Elohim, and did not obey the commands. And that was given to them, and that was contemporary to their day or current to their day. But then immediately, as in Deuteronomy, right after giving the blessing and the curses, they're basically prophesied then that they would not hearken to Yahweh's voice and would not keep his commands, would ultimately be judged. They would be destroyed within their land and then scattered from their land to the Gentiles of the world. They'll be scattered out of their land and into all the different places amongst the world and captive to the Gentiles and just dispersed, the diaspora. So that becomes the theme here of what we're seeing in the Old Covenant, is that there is a judgment and a scattering of Yisrael because of their disobedience. And because of this judgment and scattering, then the hope of Yisrael becomes their theme. It becomes what they're striving for. And let me just share, I will tell you, and I'm going to read some scripture in a moment, a number of scriptures to validate what I'm trying to say here. But let me just see if I can define this hope of Yisrael after they've been scattered and are amongst the amongst the Gentiles and scattered into the world. First of all, the hope of Yisrael is the hope of everlasting life. It is the hope of a resurrected body with a new heart and a new spirit and ability to obey the voice of Yahuah and to keep his commands. And the hope of Israel is to be gathered back into the land of promise. Now in the old writings, it's referred to as Mount Zion, but we also know it as New Jerusalem in the new writings, Revelation and such. And this hope of Israel, this resurrection of the body and this gathering back into the promise, it all begins at the beginning of the day of Yahuah. Let me also define the day of Yahuah here. And most folks know it as the day of the Lord. If you do any eschatological work, if you have any interest at all in eschatology, you probably know about the day of the Lord. We're going to refer to it as the day of Yahuah. And it is a prevalent theme throughout both the Old and New writings. It is the end of the current days, the days that were and are, and it's the beginning of the reign of Elohim on earth. It is the second coming of Messiah when he comes in power and great kabod as the Lion of the tribe of Yehudah. It's the day when all of mankind is judged and dealt with by Elohim. Following the bold judgments, Messiah and his army come to earth and destroy the armies and the kingdoms of the earth that gather against him. It's the day when all the saved are gathered and resurrected and changed into their new incorruptible body and taken to their new home. Shortly after the gathering and the resurrection, our new home, New Jerusalem, or Mount Zion, the kingdom of Elohim, comes down to earth. Now, I would like to take you through, and this might be a little bit long, and I'm sorry, but I think we need to read each of these scriptures because or identify and go through each of these scriptures, because this is where this theme that I'm sharing is constant. It is, if it's not the most prevalent theme, it's right up there with all of them in the Old Covenant writings. So let me first start with Deuteronomy 30. And we get to, let me see if I can go back just a bit here to the promises of, so this is when Moses comes down and he has shared the law and the commands. And he says in Deuteronomy 28, and many Christians will know these passages, but this is where Moses says, "And it shall be, if you diligently obey the voice of Yahuah your Elohim, to guard, to do all of his commands, which I command you today, that Yahuah your Elohim shall make you high above all nations of the earth." And then he goes on to share what the blessings look like, and it's pretty amazing. Those who have read it, and it's pretty amazing. But then he shares, after he shares the blessing, he says, Moses shares with the people, "And it shall be, if you do not obey the voice of Yahuah your Elohim, to guard, to do all of his commands and his laws, which I command you today, that all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you." So then in Deuteronomy, get back to where, after we get through the curses and let me see if I can get there. So after we get through the curses, now we start talking about some prophecy that Moses is giving to the people in that day. And essentially he's letting Israel know what's going, what their future is going to be. And it begins up here. It starts with verse 19, where he begins to talk about how a man, and he uses a man, and how his heart works on him so that he begins to fall away from Yahuah. And so then as the curses fall upon Israel, this is where in Deuteronomy 22, Moses prophesies, "And the generation to come of your children who rise up after you, and the foreigner who comes from a far land, shall say, when they see the plagues of that land and the sicknesses which Yahuah has sent into it, all of its land is sulfur, salt, and burning. It is not sown, nor does it bear, nor does any grass grow there. Like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Seboim, which Yahuah overthrew in his displeasure and his wrath. And all the nations shall say, why has Yahweh done so to this land? What does the heat of this great displeasure mean? First of all, the land is destroyed. In that land of Yisra'el, it is devastated. And then when they say, what does this mean? And it will be shared that it will be said, because they have forsaken the covenant of Yahuah, the Elohim of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim. And they went and served other mighty ones, and bowed themselves to them, mighty ones that they did not know, and that he had not given to them. Therefore the displeasure of Yahweh burned against this land to bring on it every curse that is written in this book. And Yahweh uprooted them from their land in displeasure and in wrath and in great rage, and cast them into another land as it is today. So after devastating the land, he uproots the people from their land and casts them into other lands as it is today. The hidden belongs to Yahuah, our Elohim, but what is revealed belongs to us and to our children forever, to do all the words of this Torah. And so this is the hope of Yisra'el. And it shall be, when all these words come upon you, the barakah and the curse which I have put before you, and you shall bring them back into your heart among all the Gentiles where Yahuah your Elohim drives you. So these are the days when they are scattered and they're in their lands of the Gentiles, and the words come back upon them, which is a constant theme, that the blessed, the Kodeshim, the Yisrael, wherever they are, they will begin to have a heart drive that moves them back toward Elohim there. Yahuah their Elohim. And when that happens, they shall turn back to Yahuah your Elohim and obey his voice, and according to all I command you today, with all your heart and with all your being and with all your children. And then Yahuah your Elohim shall turn back your captivity and shall have compassion on you. And he shall turn back and gather you from all the peoples where your Elohim has scattered you. If any of you are driven out to the farthest parts under the Shemaim, from there Yahuah your Elohim gathers you, and from there he takes you. And Yahuah your Elohim shall bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and he shall do good to you, and increase you more than your fathers. And Yahuah your Elohim shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed, to love Yahuah your Elohim with all your heart and with all your beings, so that you might live. So I just want to break this chapter 30, verses 1 through 6 down again, just because this is the sum of what the theme is that I'm going to share in the rest of the passages. Yisrael has been judged. They have been scattered. Many years later, we know now, they didn't know how many years then, but we know it's at least 1,500 plus 2, a long time. 3,000 years, 3,500 years. And so they're from within the lands where they're at, something will happen to their hearts, and they'll turn back to Elohim. And then we're going to have Yahuah, our Elohim, gather them together. And when he gathers them together from the farthest parts of the Shemaim, from the farthest parts of the earth, the farthest parts of the heavens, then he's going to circumcise their heart and the heart of their seed. So not only those folks that he's talking to, but their seed, their future generations. Together, their hearts are going to be circumcised. And when their heart is circumcised, they're going to love Yahuah their Elohim with all their heart and with all their being, and so that they might live, which is everlasting life. This is the theme that we're going to be sharing. So that's Deuteronomy 30. I would like to go to Jubilees 1, the first chapter, which is an amazing chapter. Let me see if I can get there quickly. In fact, it's so amazing it makes me want to read the whole thing, but I'm not going to. I'm going to pretty much start. I mean, there's a goodly amount I would like to read here, but I want to start in verse 7 of Jubilees, and let me see if I can make this just a bit larger so you can see along with me a little better, maybe. Okay, so in verse 7, having spoken, first of all, the messenger is speaking to Moses up on Mount Sinai. So this is about the same time that Deuteronomy, it's before Deuteronomy is going to be written, but it's all around the same time period where we're dealing with Moses and the fledgling nation of Yisra'el. And we'll start in verse 7. It says, "And you shall write for yourself all these words which I declare to you this day, for I know their rebellion and their stiff neck, before I bring them into the land of which I swore to." Let me start again. "And you shall write for yourself all these words which I declare to you this day, for I know their rebellion and their stiff neck, before I bring them into the land of which I swore to their fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Jacob, saying, unto your seed I shall give a land flowing with milk and honey." And this is what happens once they get there. "And they shall eat and be satisfied. And they," going up to the top of the page, "and they shall turn to strange mighty ones, to mighty ones which cannot deliver them from any of their tribulation. And this witness shall be heard for a witness against them. For they shall forget all my commands, even all that I command them. And they shall walk after the Gentiles, and after their uncleanness, and after their shame, and shall serve their mighty ones. And these shall come to be an offense to them, and a tribulation, and an affliction, and a snare. And many shall perish, and they shall be taken captive. And they shall fall into the hands of the enemy, because they have forsaken my laws, and my commands, and the festivals, and my covenant, and my Shabbatot, and my Kodesh place, which I have Kodesh for myself in their midst, and my Mishkan, and my Mikdash, which I have Kodesh for myself in the midst of the land, that I should place my name upon it, and there it should dwell. And they shall make for themselves high places in Asherim and carved images, and they shall worship each his own, so as to go astray. And they shall offer their children to demons, and to all the works of the straying of their hearts. And I shall send witnesses to them, that I may witness against them. But they shall not hear, and shall slay the witnesses also. And they shall persecute those who seek the law. And they shall overturn and change all, so as to work evil before my eyes. And I shall hide my face from them, and I shall deliver them into the hand of the Gentiles for captivity, and for prey, and for devouring. And I shall remove them from the midst of the land, and I shall scatter them among the Gentiles. And they shall forget my Torah, and all my commands, and all my right rulings, and shall go astray as to new months, and Shabbatah, and festivals, and Yobelim, and laws. So there is the equivalence of Deuteronomy 29, sharing that Yisrael was going to turn to others, turn astray, turn away from the commands and the law, and we're going to follow after sin, essentially other gods and other mighty ones, and fall. And then they would be, their land will be destroyed, they will be destroyed, and then they will be scattered amongst the Gentiles. They will be cast out of their land, just like we saw in Deuteronomy. But here's where their hope begins again, because after this they shall turn to me from among the Gentiles with all their heart and with all their being and with all their strength. So there it is. Now they didn't know that, again, this is before everything has happened. This is at the time. This is actually probably just before the law was even given to them, and the knowledge of the blessings and the curses was given to them. But this is prophetic, because they're turning away and they're being scattered is prophetic, as is this gathering together. Now, the devastation and the destruction has happened, but the gathering remains a future event. So after this they shall, I'm sorry, I just read that to you. But I'll read it again. After this they shall turn to me from among the Gentiles with all of their heart and with all of their being and with all of their strength. And I shall gather them from among the Gentiles, and they shall seek me, so that I shall be found by them. And when they seek me with all their heart and with all their being, and they shall find me when they seek with all of their heart and with all their being. And I shall reveal to them great peace with righteousness. And I shall plant them in this land in truth, with all my heart, with all my being, and they shall be for a barakah and not for a curse, and they shall be the head and not the tail. And I shall build my mikdash in their midst, and I shall dwell with them, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people in truth and in righteousness. And I shall not forsake them nor fail them, for I am Yahuah, their Elohim. I'd like to make some comments here. This is a future event, but this is so amazing. If this is not the hope of Yisrael and what the church identifies with as well, I wouldn't know what is, because this is not only when Yisrael turns their heart back to Yahuah, he shares that he is going to turn to them with all his heart, to us with all his heart, with all his being. And then he's going to barak them and make them a barak. This is what is before us. We're going to be gathered from amongst the Gentiles, and we're going to be given this. We're going to be handed great peace with righteousness. That is our hope, and the body, which we're going to talk about here in a second. And the mikdash, by the way, and the what's the other word that he uses? Mikdash. It doesn't matter, but the mikdash and the Mishkan, that's his dwelling place and his sanctuary is what he's referring to with those. So now then after he says, and I shall not forsake them nor fail them, after this promise, Moses then falls on his face and begins to plead for his people, as he always did, because he's hearing that they're going to fail and they're going to be scattered. He probably also hears this regathering, but he's heard that they're going to be judged and scattered. And he pleads for them. Don't let it happen, Yahuah. Don't let it happen, O Adonai. And this is his, and you could read it for yourself. I won't do it to you here, but it's Moses pleading. And then we've got the response of Yahuah to Moshe. I know their unruliness and their thoughts, and they are stiff-necked, and they shall not be obedient till they confess their own sin and the sin of their fathers. And after this, so basically he's saying to Moshe, yeah, but this is what they're going to do. Their actions are going to bring this upon themselves. But then again, he reiterates that after this they shall turn to me in all uprightness and with all their heart and with all their being. So he's going back to what he shared with up here in verse 15. And I shall and this is the resurrected body that I'm referring to. That is a theme throughout the old writings here, because this is what enables them. So as he said in Deuteronomy that he circumcised their heart, here he's saying again, and I shall circumcise the foreskin of their heart and the foreskin of the heart of their seed. So not only the people standing there that will be standing there and current in those times, but the future generations to come. He's going to circumcise the foreskin of the heart, and he's going to, and I shall create in them a Kodesh spirit, and I shall cleanse them so that they shall not turn away from me from that day unto eternity. And their being shall cling to me and to all my commands, and they shall perform my commands. And I shall be their father, and they shall be my children. We see him referred to in the new writings as father, as Messiah comes on the scene, and he's a child of the Father as well. He's a son of the Father, and so we hear him speaking of Yahuah as Father over and over again. But here's the promise that he's also our Father, and we are his children. We're all his children. And they shall be called children of the living Elohim, and every messenger and every spirit will know, even they shall know that these are my children, and that I am their Father in uprightness and righteousness, and that I love them. So I'm just going to say again that this circumcision of the forehead, we all turn to him with our whole heart and our whole being, and he gathers us. And in that gathering, he circumcises the foreskin of our heart and the foreskin of the heart of our seed, everybody that he's gathered together. So he cuts away the flesh, he circumcises that foreskin, and he cleanses them so that they shall not turn away from me from that day unto eternity. So from the moment we receive our resurrected body, we are going to be walking in harmony from there on out with Yahuah. And our new beings shall cling to me and to my commands. From there forward, we will never struggle. The flesh is gone, and we will never struggle with sin again. I would say that happens for many upon death. The flesh is taken away, but because once somebody dies and the flesh is taken away, their struggle with sin in this world is over. The next thing that they're waiting for is the gathering and the resurrection of their body. Okay, so that is Jubilees. That's this message in Jubilees. I would like to go to First Enoch, where he's also sharing pretty much the same thing. So let me get there. Okay, and I cannot go to Enoch without reading the entire first chapter. It's not very long, but it's an amazing chapter. And then we're going to go to chapter 5, but I want to read chapter 1 too. So here's First Enoch, the words of the Barakah of Hanak, which is Enoch, with which he Barak, which just a reminder, Barak is blessed. Barakah is the blessings of Barakah is blessings, and Barak is blessed. So with which he barak the elect and the righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and unrighteous are to be removed. So clearly this is the end times, this day of the Lord, when righteousness is meted out to the world by Yahuah. And he took up this parable and said, Hanak, a righteous man, whose eyes were opened by Elohim, saw the vision of the Kodesh one and the Shemayim, which the messenger showed me. And from them I heard all matters, and from them I understood as I saw, but not for this generation, but for a distant one which is to come. And I'll just quickly comment, we are approaching, if we're not that generation is soon to be. So we're in the time that Hanak is referring to here. Concerning the elect, I said, and took up my parable concerning them. The Kadash, great one, will come forth from his dwelling, and the eternal Elohim will tread upon the earth on Mount Sinai, and appear from his camp, and appear in the strength of his might from the Shemaim of Shemaim. And all shall be smitten with fear, and the watchers shall quake, and great fear and trembling shall seize them unto the ends of the earth. And the high mountains shall be shaken, and the high hills will be made low, and shall melt like wax before the flame. And the earth shall be completely torn in pieces, and all that is upon the earth shall perish. And there shall be a judgment upon all. But here's our promise. But with the righteous he will make peace, and will protect the elect, and compassion shall be upon them, and they shall all belong to Elohim, and they shall be prospered, and they shall be all be Baruch, and he will help them all, and light shall appear unto them, and he will make peace with them. And see, he comes with 10,000s of his Kodeshim to execute judgment upon all, and to destroy all the wicked, and to convict all flesh, and all the works of their wickedness which they have committed wickedly, and of all the harsh matters which wicked sinners have spoken against them. I'm sorry, you cannot go to Enoch without reading that first chapter, but let me go to the 5th chapter here. Let me get down to verse 7, which is where it, this is a little bit, well, I'll just start at verse 7. But for the elect there shall be light and joy and peace, and they shall inherit the earth. Now, Enoch does not go into the judgment of Yisra'el, and he does not go into the scattering of Yisra'el, and he doesn't necessarily go into the gathering of Yisra'el, except that I'm going to suggest that maybe this is referring to a similar event, because for the elect there shall be light and joy and peace, and they shall inherit the earth. So the elect, which we know will be gathered together, we're going to inherit the earth. But this is what I'm really after, because this is the resurrect, when the elect is given light and joy and peace, and when we do inherit the earth, which we know happens at the gathering in the day of Yahuah, then there shall be given them, I'm just read as it's written, and then there shall be given wisdom to the elect, and they shall all live and never sin again. So we're going to have new bodies in wisdom and spirit, and we shall all live eternal, everlasting, and never sin again, either through wickedness or through pride. But they who are wise shall be humble, and they shall not transgress again, nor shall they sin all the days of their high, which is life, nor shall they die of anger or wrath, but they shall complete the number of the days of their high, and their life shall be increased in peace, and the years of their joy shall be multiplied in eternal gladness and peace all the days of their life. So that is the hope of Yisra'el, that we would be given wisdom, we will live together and never sin. We're going to be given a new body that's capable of all of this at the time of the day of Yahuah. So we need to go forward. So Enoch, of course, the time of Enoch it's before Jubilees and it's before Deuteronomy. This is back. Enoch lived in the days of the flood when he shared this, and when he gave his messages. I think he probably came on the scene. Well, I'd have to go and do the math, but he was on the scene about midway through the flood. So he predates Deuteronomy, he predates Jubilees, but all of this remains future and prophetic. Now we need to go, and I want to visit the timeline of Yisrael, because really the rest of the writings are all during this time and from the prophets of this time. And after Moses and after the formation of Israel, there was a period of time where they did well under the leadership of Joshua, who succeeded Moses as the leader of the nation. Then we had the period of the judges, which was a mixed bag. But ultimately, the peoples demanded a king, and so we were given Saul as our first king. Saul didn't do great. He failed, and really because of his failings, the kingdom was wrested away from Saul and given to David. And that's really a separate family too. So the kingdom is wrested away and given to David. And David was a righteous man. He was a good man. He wasn't a perfect man, but he was a man after Yahuah's own heart who, wanted to do the will of Yahuah. But there was sin, there were errors, there were mistakes, there was, I think, bad judgment. I mean, he had too many wives, he had too many sons, and he ended up with a bad family life, and he ends up with lots of rebellion amongst his sons. But ultimately, his kingdom is passed down to Solomon, the son of Bathsheba, which is a story unto itself. But we all know Solomon as, the richest, the wisest. He grew in great splendor. And I'm going to say wisest in the beginning because in his early years as king, he probably was prophetic too, but he certainly was a man of wisdom, considered the man of wisdom, wrote Proverbs and wrote other books of wisdom. And he had a season where he was really doing well and was pleasing and just doing well. But at some point, he began to turn away, and we know he ended up between wives and concubines had 1,000 women involved. Can't even imagine how many children that would have created, and he ended up turning to their gods. By the time it's all said and done, Solomon turns away from Yahuah and fails miserably, and Yahuah rejects him. But for the sake, maybe not rejects, but judges him for sure. And for the sake of David, Yahuah tells Solomon he's not going to wrest the kingdom away from him during his lifetime, but upon his death and upon the end of his reign, the unified, what they call the United Kingdom, or the unified nation of Yisrael, splits. There's a rebellion. Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, who was to be king, and there's a whole story, and I won't go into it, but Jeroboam rebels against Rehoboam, and Jeroboam takes the 10 tribes of the north and separates from the 2 tribes of the south. So in the south we had Judah, the tribe of Judah, which did carry um, the scepter, because this is where the the scepter was never going to part from David, and this is where the scepter went. It did not go to the north with Israel; it stayed in the south with Judah. So Judah contained the nations, or the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and the rest of the tribes to the north all became known as Yisra'el. And so from there forward, we had Yisrael to the north, Judah to the south, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. You'll also note that Yisrael is often referred to as Ephraim as well, because Ephraim really was a dominant tribe of that in the nations within that territory and in those nations of Israel. But he was also a dominant tribe because he also had the birthright. If you go back to Joseph, um, Israel never had the first good king that ever turned back to Yahuah. In fact, during the time of Israel, they kicked out all of the priests of Levi. So the Levites were replaced by um, other priests that came and basically were not legitimate priests. And so what we saw, whatever worship they did unto Yahuah, if there was any that did take place, I mean, most of it was done unto other gods and just in rebellion. But anything that was done unto Yahuah was done inappropriately and wrong, because they did it with the wrong priests and it was all wrong. So there was nothing redeeming about Israel in the north. Um, to the south, they had a mixed bag of good and bad kings. They had a few that would come along that would try very hard to bring the people back and to tear down the Asherah poles and all the things that they would do to as they began to turn to other gods. So we had a mixed bag, and the people followed the kings. As you know, a good king would lead the people into righteousness, and they had wonderful periods of time um, and prosperity and blessing during that period of time. But it was a mixed bag. So it's during this time that they are falling away.
moving away. They are not hearkening. They are following after other gods, and they're doing all the things that Deuteronomy said that they would do, that the book of Jubilees said that they would do. They are doing this now. In the south, the north, they're doing it on steroids, and in the south, they're doing it. And then we have, in the midst of all of this, a variety of prophets that come on the scene during these times. The first one was Elijah. If you can see, I'm pointing here in the middle um, of this timeline. You can see we've got Israel to the north, Judah to the south, and then the prophets here in the middle. And uh, the prophets we see in the green were prophets to Israel, and the prophets in yellow were prophets to Judah, and Obadiah, I guess, is the only one in there in blue, and they were a prophet to Edom. Uh, but so this is where we begin to see um, that during the writing of the prophets, during the period of time when they are being judged, and they are being their land is turning bad. They are turning bad. This is before they scatter that we begin to see the prophets. But then the prophets also continue. In fact, here, let me just show you. Joel and Elisha and Elijah all were before any of the scattering. Well, let me go and show you. It's here where we see the green cut off in 722 BC, that the northern tribes become scattered and they're taken off to Assyria. And it isn't until 150 years later that the southern tribes also fall and are taken to, they're scattered and taken to Babylon. Now, I'm not sure that's a full scattering, because many stayed in the land. Some went off to Babylon into captivity, but then many of the ones that went off into captivity came back into the land here. And then ultimately they were in the land at the time of Messiah. Um, but shortly after the ascension of Messiah, they began to disperse because of all the persecution that was taking place. And by AD 70, when Rome came in and destroyed, first of all, they killed many. It's a horrible time. They came in and devastated Jerusalem, took the temple down. And at that point in time, the southern tribes, if they weren't dispersed to Babylon, maybe Babylon was just captivity. If they weren't, if that isn't considered the dispersion, which I don't think it is, then in AD 70, that definitely was considered the dispersion. And it's generally thought that they went to the south into the lands of Egypt primarily, where the tribes of Israel all went north into Assyria. That's why you'll also see prophecies when we talk about gathering from the north, Assyria, and from the south, Egypt. We'll see that those are predominant areas where the tribes were scattered, ultimately scattered throughout the whole world, but those are predominant areas where they were scattered. But here are, and so then we have, after Elisha, we have Amos, a prophet to the Israel, who prophesied before the dispersion. Uh, Hosea was prophesying during the dispersion of the tribes of the north, and it was Isaiah came on the scene about the time just before. You'll see in the beginning of his writings that he's talking before Israel has been dispersed, but he's still in his days, and he's still writing, and he's still prophesying when they become dispersed. So he begins to talk that way. Same thing with Micah. Micah starts before the dispersion of Israel, but continues after. Now, Isaiah and Micah are primarily prophets to the southern kingdom, to Judah, where Hosea is primarily a prophet to the northern kingdom. Jonah was a prophet to Assyria. Nahum was a prophet to Assyria. Uh, and then after Jeremiah comes along the scene, about the time that was certainly after the fall of Israel. Israel's gone by the time of Jeremiah. And they're gone by the time of Zephaniah and Habakkuk and Daniel and Ezekiel and Zechariah and Malachi. They're gone. During the days of Jeremiah, the um, the southern kingdom is being devastated and ultimately being led away captive by Babylon during the days of Jeremiah. Uh, Daniel begins his prophecy He's primarily a prophet during the captivity, but he begins his life prior to. Ezekiel is also a prophet of during that captivity, but he begins his prophecy while um, there is captivity taking place in Babylon, but the tribes remain in Israel. So anyway, the point of all of that is we get into the prophetic writings now, where everything is going wrong. Um, some of them before the actual dispersion and the scattering. But no matter what, the land is being devastated, and ultimately we end up getting scattered. And this is the theme. This is what's going on in the days of the prophets. So I would like to share with you a document. I'm just building it, but I've been going through scriptures chronologically, and I'm in the middle of uh, Isaiah, which puts me, uh, you know, in the days of the judgment and dispersion um, of the northern kingdoms, the northern tribes. But what I'm doing in this document is I am noting all of the various things as I go through the timelines of the kings, and as the prophets are interspersed in that timeline, and I'm reading them, I'm making notes of references to what I'm referring to as either the scattering and the regathering and or the promise or the hope of Israel. So I'm gonna try to go quickly through this, but the idea behind it is to just show you how many times these themes are coming up in these various, even the what we would call the minor prophets. So Joel came up first, Joel, and in chapter 2, verses 2, I didn't, and I'm not going to go read it. I didn't in chapter 2, verses 21 through 29. There is a promised restoration of land and possessions. There's a promise during this period of time when things are so bad. There's a promise that the possessions will be um, returned, and good times are ahead of us yet. But when we get to chapter 2, verses 32 through chapter 3, verses 1, and then also 3:2, we get the references that I'm referring to here. And I'll just quickly read my notes here. Salvation, and it shall be that everyone who calls on the name of Yahuah will be delivered. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be an escape, as Yahuah has said, and among the remnant whom Yahuah calls. For look, in those days and at that time, when I turn back the captivity of Yehudah and Jerusalem. And he goes on to, in chapter 3, verse 2, discuss my inheritance, Israel, whom they have scattered among the Gentiles. In Obadiah, he makes a reference to, but on Mount Zion there shall be a remnant, and they shall be Kodash. In Amos, in that day, the booth of David is raised up. The captivity of my people Israel is turned back, and they are restored in their land, not to be uprooted again. So when they're regathered, they will not be. When we're regathered back into that land, when it all occurs at the day of the Lord, we will not be uprooted again. Hosea, uh, verses 1:11, children of Yehudah and Israel shall be gathered together and appoint themselves one head. They shall come out of the earth, for great is the day of Yisra'el. In chapter 3, afterward, the children of Israel shall return, seek Yahweh and David, which is the lineage of David, that's Messiah, their sovereign, in the latter days. In chapter 6, a harvest is appointed for Yehudah when he turns back the captivity of his people, which is the constant theme. The Yisrael amongst the nations and the Gentiles are considered captives, and Yahuah turns it back in the day of Yahweh. And when we get into Isaiah, which is where I'm at now, um, Isaiah it's just so chock full, and it's not. When we get to Jeremiah, it's going to be, and Ezekiel, it's going to be a little more coherent, meaning it's all kind of tied together. But the theme of the scattering and the gathering and the hope of Israel is cast throughout Isaiah. The Kodesh and escaped ones in Mount Zion. Uh, Yahuah gathers the outcasts of Israel and assembles the dispersed of Yahuah from the four corners of the earth. There's the regathering. Um, the earth is defiled because they have transgressed the Torah, changed the law, broken the everlasting covenant. I'm sorry, that just relates to Deuteronomy and the reason that they were being judged. In that day, speaking of the regathering, and in that day it shall be that a great horn is blown, the great trumpet, and those who were perishing in the land of Ashur to the north, like I said, and the outcasts of the land of Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, shall come. So the outcasts from the north and the south and from the four corners shall come, and they shall worship Yahuah on the Kodesh mountain in Jerusalem. The Kodesh mountain is Mount Zion in Jerusalem, which is Jerusalem, which we understand will be the New Jerusalem. And I'm at chapter 43, which is where I'm at. I'm in chapter 44, but this is where I'm leaving off. That's why you won't see anything past this. I've got more work to do. But now I have redeemed you and called you by name, for I, Yahuah, your Savior, I shall bring you and your seed from the east and gather you from the west. I shall say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not keep them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. All those called by my name, will, all the nations will be assembled and the peoples gathered. So here we are, the day of the Lord and the gathering here in Israel. Micah, because Micah was contemporary. I've already finished Micah, but Micah is also got some promises in chapter 2. I shall certainly gather all of you, O Jacob. I shall bring together the remnant of Yisra'el in the day of Yahuah. In chapter 5, the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many peoples. They shall be among the Gentiles. So that is speaking of the scattering. So this theme is of being judged, scattered, gathered is prevalent throughout all of the prophets. But now I want to return to Jeremiah, because that's where we get into the major, some coherency. But I will also say Jeremiah spreads this message out over 2 or 3 chapters, so we won't be able to. I'm going to have to highlight a few things before I get into the promise or the hope of Jeremiah. But let's go ahead and go there now. So let me see if I can get to the beginning of where I want to be. Yes. So these are just some of the beginning. This is in chapter 23 of Jeremiah, where we just begin to hear some of, because Jeremiah speaks about this for a long period of time, over many chapters, before it culminates in chapter 31. So I'm going to highlight a few things as we approach chapter 31. So this is chapter 23. Verse 18, for who has stood in the counsel of Yahuah, and who has seen and heard his word? Who has listened to his word and obeyed it? See, a storm of Yahuah shall go forth in a rage, a whirling storm, it whirls on the head of the wicked. The displeasure of Yahuah shall not turn back until he has done and established the purposes of his heart. In the latter days you shall understand it perfectly. I highlighted this because this is referencing the day of Yahuah that most of the church and eschatology understands. This is the day of judgment. It will be a day when Yahuah himself comes and through his Messiah and through Elohim comes and metes out judgment, which is also the time of the gathering. But I want to just note that it says, in the latter days you shall understand it. So there's a reference to the latter days here now. Let me go to page 1187. Forgive me. Sorry. See if I can do this better. Okay, 1187. This is chapter 29 in what I've highlighted here in verse 11. For I know the plans I am planning for you, declares Yahuah, plans of peace and not of evil, to give you an expectancy and a latter end. Then you shall call on me and shall come and pray to me, and I shall listen to you. And you shall seek and you shall find me when you search for me with all your heart. And I shall and I shall be found by you, declares Yahuah, and I shall turn back your captivity, and shall gather you from all the Gentiles and from all the places where I have driven you, declares Yahuah, and I shall bring you back to the place from which I have exiled you. Now I recognize, and if you are studying this, you'll see that this is following up, because Jeremiah is a prophet to, let me see, Jeremiah, yeah, Israel has already been dispersed, and Jeremiah is prophesying before the captivity and into the captivity. And what we know up here, he's talking about the captivity during that period of time. And so they've been taken away and they're going to be brought back. And there is some discussion of what that is like to have been dispersed to the land of Egypt and brought back. But many will conflate this up here, which is talking about their time in Babylon and their return from Babylon. But they conflate it with end time discussions. And the reason we know this is end time discussion, and that he's turned from just talking about what is happening in those days to Judah, we know because of how what he speaks of is so in line with Deuteronomy and other passages of what is planned on. So so let me just go back through it again, because this is what we see in Deuteronomy and uh, in the other writings. For I know the plans I am planning for you. These would be future plans, declares Yahweh, plans of peace and not of evil, to give you an expectancy and a latter end. I suppose it doesn't have to mean latter days, but it's suggestive of latter end, as he did earlier. But then this is the same language we get in Jubilees, the same language we get in Deuteronomy, and the same language we get elsewhere. They will call on but us, they shall call on Yahuah and shall come and pray to me, and he's going to listen to them. And they shall seek him and find him when they search for him with all their heart. And I shall be found by you, declares Yahweh, and I shall turn back your captivity, which could be thought of as Babylon, but it's really at the end times, all of their dispersion is considered captivity, not just Judah and Babylon, but all of Israel, wherever they've gone. And this is the promise of gathering them together from all the Gentiles and from all the places where I have driven you, declares Yahweh, and I shall bring you back to the place from which I have exiled you. All of that is, if you understand the characteristics of those promises, all of that is speaking of those promises. Let me see if I can get to 29. Let me just scroll forward here. Okay, so in chapter 30, we are also talking. Let me just read the highlighted. For look, the days are coming, declares Yahuah, when I shall turn back the captivity of my people, Yisra'el and Yehudah. Again, only Yehudah is in Babylon. Yisra'el is up in Assyria and in other lands. So here again, like I was just referring to in the chapter before, we're talking about turning back the captivity of the people from wherever they've been scattered. And this is end time, day of the Lord prophecy here. And I shall bring them back to the land that I gave to their fathers, and let them possess it. And then verse 7, oh, for great is that day, there is none like it, and it is the time of Jacob's distress, but he shall be saved out of it. Now we recognize that to be the time of great tribulation, taking place just before the day of the Lord, the day of Yahuah. And that shall be in that day, declares Yahuah of hosts, that I break his yoke from your neck, and tear off your bonds, and foreigners no more enslave them. And they shall serve Yahuah their Elohim, and David their sovereign, whom I raise up for them. And that's Messiah. And you, do not fear, O Jacob, my servant, declares Yahweh, nor be discouraged, O Yisra'el. For look, I am saving you from afar, and your seed from the land of their captivity. Your seed, these are future generations. And Jacob shall return and have rest and be at ease with no one to trouble them. trouble him. For I am with you, declares Yahuah, to save you. Though I make a complete end of all Gentiles where I have scattered you, yet I do not make a complete end of you, but I shall reprove you in judgment and by no means leave you unpunished. So this is all end time stuff. Having been judged and reproved and being punished and then scattered, this is the promise of the regathering after the great tribulation, the great distress, the time of Jacob's distress. After the great tribulation and the end of days, this is the regathering from amongst all the nations where Yisrael has been scattered. Chapter 17 of 30. For I restore health to you and heal you of your wounds, declares Yahweh. For they have called you an outcast, saying, This is Zion. No one is seeking her. Thus said Yahuah, see, I turn back the captivity of Jacob's tents, and have compassion on his dwelling places. And the city shall be built upon its own mound, and the palace stand in its right place. And out of them shall arise thanksgiving and the voice of those who are laughing. And I shall increase them, and they shall not diminish. And I shall esteem them, and they shall not be small. And his children shall be as before, and his congregation shall be established before me. And I shall punish all who oppress them. And his prince shall be from him, and his ruler shall come from among him. And I shall bring him near, and he shall approach me. For who is this who pledged his heart to approach me, declares Yahuah. And you shall be my people, and I shall be your Elohim. Again, that theme of during that time when we are gathered after the distress and the prince being Messiah, uh, we're being gathered. They're being gathered back into their land where they begin to be prospered again. And the ruler, their king, Messiah, shall come from among them. And it's Messiah is the one who pledges his heart to Yahuah. And then we have this theme again of you shall be my people and I shall be your Elohim. That is a theme whenever he's talking about the hope of Yisrael, because when we come back into the land and we're given our new resurrected body and our new ability to walk in harmony and obedience in the Spirit, those are going to be awesome days. And during those days, it's going to be during those times that we are considered his people. He is considered our Elohim. We're considered his children, and he is considered our Father. And then here's the day of the Lord promises again. See, the storm of Yahweh shall go forth in a rage, a whirling storm. It bursts upon the head of the wicked. The burning displeasure of Yahuah shall not turn back until he has done and established the purposes of his heart. In the latter days you shall understand it. So here is this discussion that I'm talking about, this scattering, this regathering, this resurrection into a body of people who follow and are in harmony with Yahuah. He will be our Elohim and we shall be his people. This takes place in the latter days, in the day of Yahuah, when he comes and he brings recompense to the nations and to the world the nations who have held them captive, and to the world, but then he brings to Yisrael and us the promises, and we will understand it in the latter days, which is what's happening. We are coming into this understanding, and we will definitely come into this understanding as these days continue to approach. So chapter 31, at that time declares Yahuah, I shall be the Elohim of all the clans of Israel, and they shall be my people. So he's not talking about just Judah here. He's talking about all the clans, all the 12 tribes of Israel. And if you as I share, I'm saying that we have joined Israel. So we are amongst the clans that, even if we're Gentiles, if we've joined ourselves to Yahushua, the Messiah, then we have joined ourselves to Israel, and we are parts of these clans of Israel that shall be called his people. Check my time. Good. And then Yahuah appeared to Jeremiah from afar, and he says, I have loved you with an everlasting love, therefore I shall draw you with kindness. I am going to build you again, and you shall be rebuilt, O maiden of Yisrael. Again you shall take up your tambourines and go forth in dances of those who rejoice. For thus, in chapter 7, for thus said Yahuah, sing with gladness for Jacob, and shout among the chief of the nations. Cry out, give praise, and say, O Yahuah, save your people, the remnant of Yisrael. See, I am bringing them from the land of the north, and shall gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them the blind and the lame, those with child and those in labor together, a great assembly returning here. With weeping they shall come, and with prayers I bring them. I shall make them walk by rivers of waters, and in a straight way in which they do not stumble. For I shall be a father to Yisra'el and Ephraim. He is my firstborn. Here we are with the Father, Son, Father, children theme, Elohim, um, people theme. But I also, I'm not going into it here, but these are just wonderful times. Everybody's going to be so happy. And as we turn our hearts toward Yahweh, I mean, he just describes what happens as we turn our hearts toward Yahweh and experience that regathering. Here in verse 10, hear the word of Yahuah, O Gentiles, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, who scattered Yisrael? He who scattered Yisrael gathers him, and shall guard him as a shepherd his flock. Chapter 16. Thus said Yahuah, hold back your voice from weeping. Now this is now. Let me just say before I get to 16. This is in 15. This is a voice was heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping. Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children because they were no more. We know that this is used in Matthew and the Gospels as referring to and used to refer to the time when Herod killed the children of the land as he was trying to stamp out Messiah. But that's not the only time Rachel wept for her children, because her children were destroyed many times during those judgment times. They they were killed by Egypt. They were killed by Assyria. They were killed just many times. But the point of Jeremiah isn't to speak about Rachel weeping or the specific children that she's weeping for, but it's to encourage Rachel, who is weeping because her children have been destroyed and killed. He says to her, hold back your voice from weeping. Let me just read it as it's written. Thus said Yahuah, hold back your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for there is a reward for your work, declares Yahuah, and they shall return from the land of the enemy. And there is an expectancy for your latter end, declares Yahuah, and your children shall return to their own country. This is the promise of the gathering. And for those that are dead, it's the resurrection. It's not just for the people of the time, it's for the future generations. It's for all who die and belong to Yahuah, who are going to be raised and resurrected, gathered into the land, and partaking in what's going to be wonderful in that day of Yahuah. And then verse 23, thus said Yahuah of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, let them once again say this word in the land of Yehudah and its cities when I turn back their captivity in Barak, you, O home of righteousness, mountain of Kodesh Yah, that's Mount Zion. For I shall fill the weary being, and I shall replenish every grieved being. Promise of the resurrection and how we're going to be. It's just going to be wonderful. Okay, and here's where it culminates in. Are we in chapter 30 still? Or let me see. Are we in 30? I think we must be in 31. Yep, we're in 31, chapter 31. And this is where it culminates in a description of I'm going to say the resurrection. Let me just read it to you. See, the days are coming, declares Yahuah, when I shall make a new covenant with the house of Yisrael and with the house of Yehudah. Not just Yehudah, but Yisrael. With all the 12 tribes, with all the clans, he's making this new covenant. Not like the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim or Egypt, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, declares Yahuah. So we have the covenant that was made to Israel in the days of Moses, but that's not the covenant we're talking about here. This is a new covenant. And this is the covenant I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, declares Yahuah. I shall put my Torah in their inward parts and write it on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. So this is, in my opinion, and I'm pretty confident in it, this is the resurrection. When we are regathered and when we are resurrected, we will no longer be subjected to the letter of Torah. We don't need it anymore, because Torah, his commands, his ways are going to be, they're going to be put on our inward parts. It's going to be written on our hearts. And here's the theme again, described in Deuteronomy and Jubilees. And when we have this time, and Enoch, when we have this time where we've been resurrected, and now we are walking in harmony with Yahuah, and we are sinning no more because Torah is written on our heart. This is a description of that time. And they shall no longer, and this is around the same time. So what I mean by that is this is at the time of gathering in the day of Yahuah. Let me also just say also, the days are coming, and this is the day of Yahuah when I shall make the new covenant. So this happens in the day of Yahuah, when this new covenant happens, in my opinion, and I think I'm correct, by not just from this scripture, but from the preponderance of evidence. For it's in those days, I will make this covenant in those days, which I'm saying is the day of Yahuah, declares Yahuah, when they gathers them and puts them together. And this is also affirming when those days shall be, because they shall no longer teach each one his neighbor and each one his brother, saying, know Yahuah, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares Yahuah. For I shall forgive their wickedness and remember their sin no more. So wickedness will be done with. Sin will be a thing of the past, and it's not necessary to tell anybody about Yahuah, because everybody's going to know he's going to be living with us. This is when, after the gathering together, um, this is the time when Mount Zion comes down, the New Jerusalem comes down, the Kabod, not sorry, the Kabod too, but the dwelling of Yahuah comes in our midst. Everybody, all the world will be seeing and experiencing, not from afar, but we're going to be experiencing Yahuah, because it's going to be in our midst. And now we turn to Ezekiel. And let me get to Ezekiel. All right, so let me first go to chapter 11 of Ezekiel, because it has reference to all of this. Chapter 11, verse 16. Therefore say, thus said the Adon Yahuah, although I have sent them far off among the Gentiles, and although I have scattered them among the lands, yet I was for them a mikdash for a little while in the lands to which they came. Therefore say, in verse 17, therefore say, thus said the Adon Yahuah, and I shall gather you from the peoples, and I shall assemble you from the lands where you have been scattered, and I shall give you the land of Yisra'el. So I'm going to go back up to 16. So by the time of Ezekiel, they've scattered off all of the northern tribes, and they're going to later scatter off the rest of the tribes of Judah in AD 70 when they finish it off. And so he refers to how they're going to be scattered amongst all the lands. They have been scattered, and the rest of them are going to be scattered, even though for a little while he was with them and living amongst them in the lands to which they had come. Those days had come and gone by the time of Ezekiel. But here's the promise of the gathering and the resurrection. I shall gather you from the peoples, and I shall assemble you from the lands where you have been scattered, and I shall give you the land of Yisra'el. So this is the promise, the hope of Yisra'el, that they shall be gathered and assembled. And we're going to see in a moment where we talk about the resurrection. Let me get to that page, 1350. Okay, so 1350, which is chapter 32 of Ezekiel, where he's, I'll just read it for you. Verse 24. And I shall take you from among the Gentiles, and I shall gather you out of all lands, and I shall bring you into your own land. So there's the regathering from where they've been scattered. And I shall sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean. From all your filthiness and from all your idols I cleanse you. This is the resurrection. This is the new body. This is the new body that will have a new spirit and a new ability to follow commands, to walk in harmony with Yahuah. I shall sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean. From all your filthiness and from all your idols I cleanse you. And I shall give you a new heart and a new spirit, and put a new spirit within you. I shall take the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I shall give you a heart of flesh, and put my ruah within you. And I shall cause you to walk in my laws and guard my right rulings, and shall do them. And you shall dwell in the land I gave to your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I shall be your Elohim. If you are recognizing the pattern and the characteristic of these promises, here it is again. They were gathered and brought into their land. And I'm sorry if this is being redundant. It just needs to be driven home. They've been scattered. Now they're being regathered into their land, where they, at the time of, which is all happening at the day of Yahuah, at the time that they're being gathered back into their land from where they've been scattered, they are also being resurrected. They are being sprinkled with clean water. They're being given a new heart, a new spirit, uh, even a new flesh. The spirit of Yahuah is a new spirit within us, just like it's promised in Jubilees and Enoch and Deuteronomy and elsewhere, and just like it's promised in Jubilees and Enoch, when we dwell in the land, I'm sorry, when this happens, we're going to be able to walk in his laws and guard his right rulings. In other words, we're going to be able to do his commands, walk in his commands, because the Torah is written on our heart, and we're going to guard his ways and his right rulings, his ways, and we will dwell in that land that he gave the fathers. And here's the theme: and you shall be my people, and I shall be your Elohim. You shall be my children, and I shall be your father. So I placed Zechariah on here as a list in the list, but admittedly I have not, while I've read Zechariah many times, I have not read it in recently from this perspective. I do know Zechariah is chock full of end time discussion, the coming back of Messiah and different things. So I expect to see some of these themes in Zechariah, but I haven't proven it out. And so I'm not going to spend any time there. And I'm not really asking you to go there either. I've just listed it because it's the remaining, prophet that I'm anxious to go and read and look at. So let me summarize the common themes of everything I've been reading. I've been taking you through the various scriptures, but let me see if I can organize them and consolidate them and uh, boil them down to what I'm really trying to say. So here is the common theme that represents the hope of Yisrael. Yisrael, let me first say, I didn't put it in here, but Yisrael's first judged within the land. The land is destroyed because of they forsook the covenant, they turned away, and all the things that went. So the first thing that happened was they were destroyed in the land. But then, as a result of forsaking the covenant, they are scattered throughout the world and taken captive by the Gentiles, again, because they forsook the covenant. But they will turn back to Yahuah with all their heart and with all their being, and will be gathered from wherever they've been scattered, from the four corners of the earth, from to the four corners of the heavens, to wherever they are, dead and alive at the time. So everybody who has died and gone to Sheol, or wherever their spirit has gone, um, they will be brought back, and they will be part of this gathering. We all, so not just the children of Israel in the days of Moses, but also their seeds and their future generations. All of us will be gathered. And, and when we are gathered and brought back into the land, our beings will be changed with something new that's able to love Yahuah and do his commands. And in those days, when we have this perfect harmony, because we have this new body, this new resurrection, sin has been dealt with and it's over, and we're walking in harmony. And during those days, the theme throughout all of those writings is we will be his people, and he will be our Elohim. He will be our father, and we will be his children. So let me just run you back through quickly um, each of the scriptures that I went through, uh, differentiating the regathering that happens in the day of Yahuah and the resurrection, the putting on of incorruption that happens in the day of Yahuah. And we'll start with Deuteronomy 30. The regathering is in verse 4. If any of you are driven out to the farthest parts of the Shemaim, from there Yahuah your Elohim gathers you, and from there he takes you. And Yahuah your Elohim shall bring you into the land, or bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. And here's the resurrection and the putting on of incorruption in verse 6. And Yahuah, your Elohim, shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed to love Yahuah with all your heart and with all your being, so that you might live. And I'm going to suggest that's live everlasting. In Jubilees 1, the regathering is in verse 15, at the day of Yahuah. After this they shall turn to me from among the Gentiles with all their heart and with all their being and with all their strength. And I shall gather them from among all the Gentiles, and they shall seek me, so that I shall be found by them. And here's the resurrection, or the putting on of incorruption, in verses 23 through 24. And I shall circumcise the foreskin of their heart and the foreskin of the heart of their seed. So not only them in the days of Moses, but all their future generations. And I shall create in them a Kodesh spirit, a set apart spirit. And I shall cleanse them, so that they shall not turn away from me from that day unto eternity. So once we receive this new body and have this new ability, we will never turn away. All of the problems we've had or over. We will live in harmony from that day forward with him forever. And their being shall cling to me and to all my commands, and they shall perform my commands, and I shall be their father, and they shall be my children. So our new beings will be able to we're going to cling to him, and we're going to keep his commands. We're going to keep Torah. In Enoch, the regathering, verse 7, but for the elect there shall be light and joy and peace, and they shall inherit the earth. The resurrection and the putting on of incorruption, verses 8 through 9 of chapter 5. And then there shall be given wisdom to the elect, and they shall all live, and I'm saying everlasting life, and never again sin, either through wickedness or through pride. But they who are wise shall be humble, and they shall not transgress again, nor shall they sin all the days of their high, which is life, and this should be of, um, nor shall they die of anger or wrath, but they shall complete the numbers of their day, and they shall live, and their lives shall be increased in peace, and the years of their joy shall be multiplied in eternal gladness and peace all the days of their life. So our resurrected body, in that resurrected body, we're going to be given wisdom, and we shall live an everlasting life and never sin again. We shall not transgress again, not any of the days of the rest of our lives. Sin is over with and dealt with, actually upon our death, even while we're awaiting resurrection from Sheol or wherever. It's over. Sin is over for us, and we shall never die again. But we shall live, we will complete the days of our lives, which are eternal. There's no end to it. And their lives shall be increased in peace, the number of and the years of their joy shall be multiplied in eternal gladness and peace all the days of their eternal everlasting life. Jeremiah 30 and 31, the regathering in chapter 30 verses 3. Now, I spent a lot of time in Jeremiah because there are so many of them, and I'm just grabbing one of the many, which is chapter 30 verse 3. For look, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I shall, I'm sorry, another typo, forgive me, shall turn back the captivity of my people Yisrael and Yahudah, not just Yahudah or the southern kingdom, but both Yisrael and Yahudah. So it's not just talking about Babylon and the captivity of Babylon. It's the captivity of all the clans, all 12, scattered to the north and scattered to the east, and later scattered to the south, wherever they've been scattered. So I shall turn back the captivity of my people Yisrael and Yahudah, declares Yahuah, and I shall bring them back to the land that I gave to their fathers, and let them possess it. He who and then in verse 31, chapter 31, verse 10, he who scattered Israel gathers him, and shall guard him as a shepherd his flock. And here's the resurrection and the putting on of incorruption in chapter 31, 33. Verse 33, for this is the covenant I shall make with the house of Yisrael, all of Israel, after those days, declares Yahuah. I shall put my Torah in their inward parts and write it on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. In that moment when we are given our new bodies, that we no longer need the letter, of Torah. We don't need it. We're not dealing, our flesh needs it. We need the letter because that's how we're going to know Torah. That's how we know and learn Torah. But we won't need it when we have our resurrected body, because it's going to be written in our inward parts. It's going to be written on our hearts. We will do it as you just saw in Jubilees and you just saw in Enoch. We'll never sin again. And we'll never sin again because Torah is written on our hearts and in our inward parts. We're just going to be able to do the commands of Yahuah. It's wonderful. In Ezekiel, um, the regathering, verse 24 of 36, and I shall take you from among the Gentiles, and I shall gather you out of the lands, all the lands, and I shall bring you into your own land. And from chapter 11 that, he spends a little time discussing the scattering and then the regathering of all of Israel into their land. And here's the resurrection, or the putting on of incorruption, in chapter 36, verses 25 through 27. And I shall sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean. From all your filthiness and from all your idols I cleanse you. And I shall give you a new heart, and put a new spirit within you. And I shall take the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I shall give you a heart of flesh, and put my ruah within you. And I shall cause you to walk in my laws, and guard my right rulings, and shall do them. And you shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I shall be your Elohim. Here again, like with Enoch and with Jubilees, is this concept that when we are given this new body, this resurrected body, with its new ability, we will walk in his laws and guard his right rulings, or his ways. So we will walk in his commands and guard his ways, and we shall do them. This is the resurrection in Ezekiel 36. So this theme and concept is also found in the new writings through the Gospels and the letters in Matthew 24, Mark 13, which is another account of Matthew. Basically it's the Olivet Discourse, another account. And in Paul's writings, when he's speaking to the Thessalonians and writing to the Thessalonians, and when Paul writes in 1 Corinthians. I'll quickly go through them with you. Matthew 24, in verse 31, this is the regathering. This is the day of Yahuah. If you know anything about Matthew 24, you know this is all the end time stuff. This is the Great Tribulation, or Jacob's distress, that gets cut short when Yahuah comes on the clouds with power and great kabod. He comes. Everybody's going to see him from the east to the west. It's going to be an amazing event. There's going to be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and Yahuah is going to appear, and hence is the beginning of the day of Yahuah. The earth is getting ready to be judged, but we are getting ready to be gathered and taken to our new home. And when we're being gathered, we are going to be transferred into our new body, resurrected, transformed into our new body. So Matthew 24, verse 31, this is the regathering. And he shall send his messengers with a great sound of the trumpet, and they shall gather together his chosen ones from the four winds, from one end, from one end of the Shemaim to the other. In John 14, I do want to this is not necessarily the gathering, but this is discussion of our home and where Messiah is going. This is the new Jerusalem. This is Mount Zion. This is our home where we will be gathered together and taken to, where Messiah says in John 14, verses 1 through 4, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in Yahuah, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many staying places, and if not, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I shall come again and receive you to myself. I shall gather you, that where I am, you might be also, or you might be too. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. Mark 13, the Olivet Discourse, just worded slightly different. But he reads in verse 27, in Mark 13, verse 27, and then he shall send his messengers. And then he shall send his messengers and assemble his chosen ones from the four winds, from the farthest part of the earth to the farthest part of the Shemaim. This is the regathering in the day of Yahuah. And then Paul speaks of the regathering in his letters to the Thessalonians here in 1 Thessalonians 4:16. Now it's interspersed throughout all of Paul's writings, but to see if we can encapsulate it here in 1 Thessalonians 4:16. Because the Adon himself shall come down from the Shemaim with a shout, with the voice of a chief messenger, and with the trumpet of Elohim, and the dead in Mashiach shall rise first. So there is the regathering. Here he comes on the cloud. He just told us he's going to be coming on the clouds with power and great glory, and he's going to send his messengers out. There's going to be a shout, and there's going to be a trumpet, and he's sending the messengers out, and the dead will rise. They'll be gathered from wherever their spirits are being kept, in Sheol, in heaven, wherever it is. Well, I don't think it's in heaven, but it doesn't really matter. It's wherever they are, they're going to be gathered from it. And then we, the living who are left over, shall be caught away together with him in the clouds to meet Adon in the air. And so we shall always be with Adon. So those who are dead and coming from Sheol and or heaven will be gathered together with those who are alive at the time. And this is the resurrection, when we are changed. We're all changed in that moment and gathered together. And then here is Paul speaking of the resurrection and the putting on of incorruption in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 51 through 54. See, I speak a secret to you. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible has to put on incorruption, and this mortal to put on immortality. And when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall come to be the word that is written, death is swallowed up in overcoming. So this is the description of the resurrection. This is this description of our new body. They will have a new spirit, new heart, and will never sin again. That our new body will be able to follow without will just be able to follow all the commands and follow his ways. So let me just summarize the hope of Yisra'el, which is the hope of all Israel. It's the hope of the assembly, the church, as we have joined Israel through Messiah. It is the hope of everlasting life. It's the hope of a resurrected body with a new heart and a spirit with ability to obey the voice of Yahuah and to keep his commands. And I'm going to add here, I didn't write it, but I'm going to add, it's in those days in the hope that, here, let me first say that the hope of Israel is to be gathered back into the land of promise, to possess the land that was given to their fathers. And we understand that to be Mount Zion and New Jerusalem. But I'm going to add here the promise that he will be our Elohim and we will be his people. He will be our father and we will be his children, and we will live in harmony with him throughout the rest of our days. And it all begins at the beginning of the day of Yahuah. Thank you, and may you all be Barak.